Well, charities operating in the Downtown Eastside are expressing concern about a leaked plan to revitalize the neighborhood. Now, it was prepared by Mayor Ken Sim's Chief of Staff, Trevor Ford. It was first obtained over the weekend by the Globe and Mail. Now, one of the proposals sought to explore ways to help Indigenous residents in the Downtown Eastside return to their home nations. And it comes as Council prepares to discuss a motion by the Mayor to pause net new supportive housing at a Council meeting tomorrow. And for more on this, we're joined by ABC City Councillor Mike Klassen, who's with us in studio this morning. Good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning, Stephen.
So this leaked memo calls for faster private development approvals and spot rezoning as a tool, it says, to invigorate the Downtown Eastside. First off, what is spot rezoning for people who don't know? When is it used?
Spot rezoning means that it strays from a plan, so it's essentially being able to go in and say there's a property that we would like to redevelop, and it doesn't follow the actual assigned zoning according to the Downtown Eastside plan, for example, and it would be an opportunity for us to look at a different either building typology or density.
And why would you vary from the plan that's already in place for the neighborhood?
Well, the plan has been around for 10 years, and we spent hundreds of millions of dollars on it, and the neighborhood, I think we can agree, has unfortunately never been worse in its lifetime. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to look at some of the entrenched problems we face with housing that exist there right now. We're not being able to, we've got SRO buildings. Hearing these stories the last few days of earthquakes, we know that those buildings, those old SRO buildings, would not survive a serious earthquake. Those are the kinds of structures that are targeted in the plan that the mayor brought forward. We want to see those replaced as soon as possible.
So what does private development then, what does that mean in terms of what would actually end up getting built then?
Again, it's an idea of what can we do in terms of how do we build. Like right now, there's the idea of a kind of a sawtooth look of the street. So there are ideas that are we going to change that? Are we going to look at different types of buildings, different kinds of density, and more of a mix of type of housing that could be in there as well.
And so how is this not gentrification?
I think it is going to be very respectful of the neighborhood. It's really important that we actually take care of the people in that community. And the thing that really resonated to me when the mayor first spoke about this plan is he wants to see the city, the Downtown Eastside, feel like it's a part of the city again. And I think in many ways it's been sort of seen as a bit of an enclave, something separate from the rest of the city. And truthfully, my goal, and I have an image that's behind my desk of Hastings Street in the early 1950s, which was vibrant, full of activity, commerce, people on the street there. That's sort of my North Star in the neighborhood. I want to be able to see a vibrant neighborhood that's a part of our city again.
But how do you do that given the challenges of the neighborhood currently? I mean, that's a lovely idea going back to the 1950s. But you know, how do you do that given what's going on down there?
Well, truthfully, it's looking forward. It's looking forward to a vibrant street that can happen once again. We had it before. How do we do it? Honestly, that is the question that has really escaped most of us for a long time. But we've tried a succession of things. We've tried making it impossible to redevelop our SROs with a $300,000 per room tax. We've given out, free substances. We've tried all sorts of things, yet we sort of find ourselves in the exact same spot. So some kind of disruption of the approach I think is really needed.
That tax on SROs, though, or that redevelopment fee on SROs, is to make sure that they remain as affordable rooms. And while no one, agrees that SROs are great, they are an integral part of the housing stock down there.
The buildings are inhumane. In many cases, they're unlivable, filled with rodents, damaged, flooded toilets, broken elevators. It's unacceptable. The people who are living there should not be living in those buildings.
Right.
And the fact is that when people do live in those buildings, their quality of life goes down to it really threatens their own ability to keep going.
So how does the freeze on building supportive housing help that?
This is a temporary pause on bringing in more supportive housing when we already have an extreme imbalance in terms of the region. We want to see the other parts of the region start taking on.
Right.
The report that we have coming to council today talks specifically about the number of units that could be built across the region. And I know that there's been a real struggle to get a lot of that stuff done. I think if anybody thinks, and by the way, the projects that we have currently in stream, and we have hundreds of rooms in stream ready to be built, those ones are going to continue. If it's related to seniors or youth aging out of care, those ones are going to get built. And so we have a number of things that are going to be exemptions to this, but it's really important that we actually start asking the region to take on some of the responsibility. And I think that's where this whole plan is kind of triggered people, is they're not really understanding that.
Well, right, but as you just said, the conditions people are living in some cases are inhumane. And so when you stop building supportive housing, with the exceptions that you just mentioned, when you stop building supportive housing, which is, in some cases just all people can afford, what's the result of that?
That presupposes that every building that we need to build needs to be supportive
No,
housing.
no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It means that when you're saying people are currently living in inhumane conditions, you're not going to build something to replace those inhumane conditions.
No, in fact, I think the actual plan itself talks about replacing both SRO buildings and temporary modular housing as well, and making sure that we have permanent housing. So that's in the specifics of the plan itself. And so we're not talking about trying to stop something other than trying to rebalance and make sure that we focus on the things that we need to, which is replacing SROs, replacing temporary units, and making sure that we have permanent, stable housing. And of course, the plan is more comprehensive. It talks about trying to deal with predators in the Downtown Eastside by attacking the gang issue, working on sort of low-level dealers in the neighborhood. There are so many. I've met with the nonprofit operators, and I've heard from them, and they have significant challenges that need our help, and we need to work collaboratively with the province. And so these are things that are right before us, and I think this is a council that is very determined to turn a corner in the Downtown Eastside. And you know what? I got to tell you, it must feel like rhetoric. You've covered City Hall for a generation.
Yes.
You've been doing this for years. You've seen the Downtown Eastside. You see what it looks like, and you've heard these words before. But the fact is that we need to make this change, and I'm determined, and I know our council is determined to make those changes.
And I appreciate the acknowledgement, but what I wonder is, you have a concentration of services in the Downtown Eastside because it's what's developed over time. It was once a neighborhood where a lot of people went down there to drink in taverns. All those licensed seats got moved over to Granville. It has traditionally been a neighborhood for low-income people. So services that serve low-income people were put into that neighborhood to serve them. Then you have people with addiction and mental health issues. Services to help people with addiction and mental health issues are put into that neighborhood. How do you take all of that apart after decades and decades of it being built?
It just so happens I am familiar with some of the history around that. We remember the name of Rich Coleman when he ended up buying a number of hotels.
Renovating 13 SROs.
And then we ended up had a number of buildings that got built. So we have essentially the city of Vancouver said, we're going to be a good partner with the province, unlike the city of Burnaby under Mayor Corrigan, as you recall, who refused to build any shelters or any social housing during that time. Not to kind of give too much history on this, but the fact is that the city has always brought forward land and wanting to be a good partner. But what I think we've done is that we've decided it's time for other municipalities to step up and be as good partners as we have been.
But it seems, and the mayor did this the other day when we spoke to him, he talked about the federal government, the provincial government, he talked about other municipalities, how everybody has to step up. This is, like it or not, this is a part of your city. You're a councillor, and that's a part of your city. I mean, what is the responsibility of this city council, when it comes to making improvements in that neighborhood, to make it less inhumane?
Well, we only have a certain number of resources that we can put onto property taxpayers in the city. So partnerships are key all the way along here. But the fact is that you need a vision, and you need a council that is determined to roll up its sleeves and make a difference on this one, not sit back and, as councils have done for successive terms, just let it go and let it get worse and worse. This isn't, and these are new ideas. And Stephen, they may not work. But the fact is that we have to try something, because nobody has decided that they really want to make a change down there in the same way that we have.
Is this a gift to developers looking to get their hands on some cheap property to put a new condo building on?
Oh gosh, I mean, that to me is a trope that I'm just kind of tired of. People are
Is it?
I think that if people want to come down there and partner with us and actually want to develop in that very challenging neighborhood, I would say good on them, because they'd be taking huge risk in doing so. So the fact is that we need to bring some change. We need to bring new housing stock. We need to try and renovate and retrofit the really bad housing stock that we have right now. And we have to make the streets feel different. We need to have businesses opening again. We need to make sure that seniors and residents in that neighborhood feel safe again. Yeah. And we have to start undermining the gang networks that have taken over buildings and have taken over the lives of so many people. We have to really help them.
Councillor, good to hear you as always. Thank you so much for coming in.
Always a pleasure, Stephen.
Appreciate it. Mike Klassen, Vancouver City Councillor. And coming up at 7:40, by the way, we're going to hear more on this from opposition Vancouver City Councillor Pete Fry. Well, we are continuing our conversation about the future of Vancouver's Downtown Eastside after a leaked memo was obtained by the Globe and Mail over the weekend. It was first reported by Francis Beulah of the Globe, longtime City Hall reporter. And it details plans already outlined by Mayor Ken Sim about housing and crime and drug use and drug dealing. The confidential October memo, though, also included, according to the Globe, a reunification roundtable with First Nations, Métis, and other Indigenous groups, as many members of the Indigenous community have expressed a desire to live in their home nations. Now, a second version of the memo was sent to the Globe and Mail. CBC also got that. And there's no mention of the reunification roundtable in the second version. Now, Sim's motion to pause net new supportive housing is set to be discussed at Council on Wednesday. Joining us now, Vancouver City Councillor Pete Fry, Green Party City Councillor. Good morning to you.
Morning, Stephen.
The mayor's office has said that this was a draft internal working document that was meant to inform discussion and explore ideas. What do you think about the fact that it was leaked, made it out to the media?
I mean, I had eyes on it late last year, actually. It was leaked to me or shown to me by a source who showed me on the condition that I would protect the privacy of the informant. So I did manage to kind of surreptitiously grab a couple of photos of it as well. So I was already aware of that memo and its existence. And what was interesting for me, and I appreciate that it's since been softened and rolled back considerably with a revised version that was submitted to the media. Mm-hmm. And I will say too that there's not all bad things in this memo. There's some interesting ideas, and I think some areas that I think we could all agree on. But there are some kind of egregious pieces, and I would say also a lot of this was quite prescient in that it informed the exact same narratives that we're seeing roll out later. So it does get into this realm of, is this a foregone decision-making illustrated in this memo? So for instance, the mayor's promise of no net new supportive housing in the city of Vancouver, word for word, literally is in this memo, and later came up as this impromptu off-the-cuff comment that he made at the Save Our Streets conference.
Right.
Similarly, there's talking here about how to add new strata development and spot rezoning in the Downtown Eastside. The piece that you mentioned about sending Indigenous people back to their home nations, I think is also one of the big sort of eyebrow raisers, because it evokes this narrative that it's somehow part of reconciliation. I mean, and I've read the TRC recommendations. I've read UNDRIP. It doesn't suggest that. In fact, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 6, really kind of protects Canadians, and by extension, obviously, Indigenous people, our freedom of mobility across this country. So to suggest that and to single out one group was especially egregious. For me, I've been taking all of this information and just sort of storing it in the back of my head with the understanding that it may inform future policy. And indeed, with the Project Barrage that was recently announced, that did not at all involve any kind of decision making from council. It was sort of just announced with ABC Caucus and the police on stage. It specifically names a lot of the pieces that, including what your earlier guest, Councillor Klassen, alluded to, the targeting of low-level drug dealers and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's all laid out in this memo. So
Well, this is, I mean, the timing of this is interesting, of course, because a report from the Integrity Commissioner from Lisa Southern has found out that, ABC held secret park board meetings and according to her, violated city policy and certainly raised concerns about transparency. Council is being looked at for exactly the same thing, is it not? Or members of council are being looked at for the same thing?
Yes, it is. Yeah. They're still working on that investigation.
And so this is not. I mean, how does it feel to you to be the one person now on council who gets shut out of these affairs? Well, I suppose Rebecca Bly is also on the outs now too.
I think apparently Rebecca Bly will be joining me on the outside now as well. I do want to distinguish that internal caucusy memos and stuff I don't think is necessarily egregious, right? I think
Of
it would
course.
be assumed that ABC councillors would communicate amongst themselves.
Yes.
What is a problem is that in that detailed report from the Integrity Commissioner, it talks about coercion. It talks about threats of disciplinary action if commissioners did not follow a certain set of voting rules that included you must vote in favor of the mayor's direction. And then additionally, there's a line in here in this report where the one of the commissioners raises the concern because we get trained on this stuff about open meetings. It's a fundamental foundational piece of local government.
Yes.
That's how we exist, is if we have open meetings. And they raised that concern, and the response from one of the ABC staffers was not to worry, I can run circles around the city lawyers. And to me, that is, a direct admission that they knew they were doing wrong, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge, let's just get it done.
All right. So let's get back to the matter at hand then. I mean, anybody who has any passing familiarity with the Downtown East Side over the past 30 years, knows that there have been many plans to try to improve the neighborhood. The Four Pillars approach in 2001, the Vancouver Agreement, which there was a member of parliament by the name of Hetty Fry who was a big part of that, representing the federal government in that. Is this any different this time around, this plan?
Well, and I mean, I have to take a little umbrage with Councillor Klassen's suggestion that nobody tried to do anything before. I mean, obviously, you just illustrated a few. And then in the last administration before I got elected, Vision Vancouver 2014, they introduced the Downtown Eastside Area Plan. I was a local resident participant on that and spent a couple of years working on that plan, working with community, really trying to develop a comprehensive plan and a roadmap for the future. And then fast forward, that was passed in 2014. By 2016, we were declaring an emergency for the overdose crisis, where we saw this scourge of fentanyl raging through the community and driving a whole new level of unanticipated street disorder and overdose death and violence and despair. And then in 2019, of course, we had COVID. So, there's been these successive compounding crises that have layered on top. So I take umbrage with the fact that nobody's tried anything, and this is the first time that somebody's taken this on. I do think what's being proposed in especially in this internal memo that talks about adding new condo development and spot rezoning and significant uplift, getting rid of the sawtooth streetscape, as Councillor Klassen alluded, in favor of a street wall. None of those are necessarily going to benefit the folks who need our help, and in the Downtown East Side. And I think that, this notion that we can solve these problems with no new supportive housing is incredibly misguided, because what's been singled out in the mayor's motion is really new supportive housing for folks who are experiencing homelessness.
Right.
They've carved out all sorts of exemptions for, healthcare and seniors and children aging out of care and all those things. And that's great. But really what's being targeted here is street entrenched people. And if the mayor somehow thinks that approach will somehow solve street disorder by not looking for options to get folks off the street and into housing, I think it's a very misguided and dangerous approach, because we know every time we've had an encampment, it's been the provincial government showing up and creating supportive housing to move those folks out of the park encampment into supportive housing.
Councillor P, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to leave it. We're going to have to leave it right there, I'm afraid, Councillor Fry. Thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it.
All right.
Okay,
Cheers.
you
Bye.
take care. That is Councillor Pete Fry, Vancouver City Council.